Hey guys, we are on day 123 of our Bible reading plan, and today we're reading Psalms 106 and 107. Now, both these Psalms are going to start out with the same phrase. They're both going to start out with, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever." And both of these Psalms are going to paint a beautiful picture of God's patience, his compassion, his long-suffering love for his people. And it says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. Who can proclaim the mighty acts of the Lord or fully declare his praise? Blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right." And then this psalm is going to recount the sin of Israel. It's going to own the fact that Israel has not done it right, that they continually turn away from the Lord, and that the Lord has been compassionate and patient with them through this process, that he has forgiven them over and over again. In verse 6, it says, "We have sinned, even as our ancestors did. We have done wrong and acted wickedly. We have sinned, even as our ancestors did." And it goes through what their ancestors did. And it talks about how many times they have turned away from God, where God has then relented and shown them kindness. And then the people have forgotten, they've disobeyed, they haven't waited on the Lord, and they've continued in their own way over and over again. The psalmist repeats how often this happens for the people of Israel. And then we get to the end of this psalm in verse 43. It says, "Many times he delivered them, but they were bent on rebellion, and they wasted away in their sin." Many times the Lord delivered them, but they were bent on rebellion. "Yet he took note of their distress when he heard their cry. For their sake he remembered his covenant, and out of his great love he relented. He caused all who held them captive to show them mercy." And so even through the affliction, the psalmist is recognizing God's hand, even through his judgment, even when he allows them to experience the consequences of living in their sin and choosing ways that are not his ways. Even in those moments when he's allowing them to experience that pain of separation from him and the judgment, all of the things that their own choices have brought on them, the psalmist here is recognizing that God was merciful, that he had his hand on his people, even in those moments. And it goes on to with another prayer. It says, "Save us, Lord our God, and gather us from the nations, that we may give thanks to your holy name and glory in your praise." And so the psalmist, it's a confession. The psalm is a confession of sin to the Lord. It's a confession of Israel's sin, and it's a recognition of God's love and mercy and grace through all of it. It is a plead that the Lord would still save them in spite of all of these things, in spite of their choices, in spite of where they've gone, that God would rescue them, that he would save them so that they could praise and glory in his name once again. And then Psalm 107, it starts out in a similar way. It says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." And then it says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." And then this psalm is going to paint a picture of people who needed rescue and the Lord rescuing them in the midst of that specific trouble. And over again, it says, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress." That's verse 6. In verse 8, then it says, "Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind." And then there is another cry for help. It says in verse 13, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress." In verse 15, "Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love, for his wonderful deeds for mankind." And then in verse 19 again, there's another story, and it says, "Then they cried out to the Lord and in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind." That's verse 21. And again in 28, we see this same repetition, another story. And then it says 28, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress." Verse 31, "Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind." And then it ends with this, "Let the one who is wise heed these things and ponder the loving deeds of the Lord." And as I did that this morning, as I pondered these loving acts of God, that the psalmist would declare God is loving in the midst of the judgment in Psalm 106, in this picture here where people continue to choose the wrong way and God continues to show up in their distress over and over and over again. He saves them from wandering through wastelands. He saves them from darkness and despair. He saves them from the sea itself. And just seeing that God continues to show up and save his people when they cry out to him in distress over and over again, it's just such a beautiful picture of how loving our God is. He looks on his people with compassion, even when they're following all of the wrong things, even when they are breaking the most fundamental of his commands that say, worship the Lord your God and worship him only. And they have turned to all of these other things and chased all of these other things. And yet the Lord looks on his people with love and compassion. He's slow to anger. He's quick to mercy. And he saves those who cry out to him. Psalm 106 is such an important psalm for us because it's a psalm of confession. And I know for me, there are days when I need to go to the Lord and just pour out my heart and confess, Lord, I've been following the wrong things. I've been worried about this. I've been trying to make things happen in my own time. Lord, would you please forgive me? Would you please come into these moments and take over and take the lead? And I will follow you and I will do the things that you want me to do in these situations. And I want your way over my way, Lord. And so I'm just encouraged as I read this. There are times in our life where we follow the wrong things, we do the wrong things, we make mistakes, and it just takes that moment of confession and repentance, turning to the Lord and confessing that he is good and choosing to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and remembering he is good and that love for us, it endures forever. There's nothing we can do that will diminish it. His love for each of us, just as it was in those days for Israel, is just as great. And his ability and willingness to forgive us is just as great. We just need to turn from him. And then we, the redeemed, need to tell the story of what he's done. Verse 2 in Psalm 107 said, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. And so what has the Lord done for you? How has he forgiven you today? And are there people that need to hear that story? That our God is still a loving, compassionate God, slow to anger, quick to mercy, long-suffering and patient with us, and that his love endures forever for each of us. Is there someone that you know that needs to hear that today? May you have a wonderful day. May the Lord be with you today in all ways, in all moments, and may you feel his presence, and may he make his face to shine upon you. Have a great day, guys.